Hi, my name is Jana Waters, and I live in Littleton, Colorado with my husband Billy and our 6 kids. We have 1 boy and 5 girls. I shouldn't say we live with our 6 kids because 3 of them are college age, and then we have 1 in high school and 1 in middle school, and then a 2nd grader. So we have quite a span going on in our family. I really have a passion for people and relationships, and a couple of years ago, I was introduced to the Enneagram, and I started studying and went through an online certification through Beth McCord. She has a company that's called Your Enneagram Coach, and I became certified as an Enneagram coach, and I work with individuals and groups to help them understand more of what's happening on the inside and how to have empathy for others and work together. So I really enjoy working with the Enneagram, and I'd love to give you a brief tutorial today about what the Enneagram is, the different components that we use in the Enneagram as tools to help us discover our core fears, our core desires, our core longings, and really become self-aware of when we're in health and when we're in stress and how we're interacting with ourselves and the world and the people around us. And this tool can help us do that. So I'm going to start by explaining to you what the Enneagram is and then all of its components. And then I will have another brief video where we go through all of the 9 types and I help you understand more fully what each type is longing for and desires and fears and what it looks like to be healthy and unhealthy in each of the numbers. So let's go ahead and just start with the Enneagram. So the Enneagram is a personality typing system that looks at the motivations of your heart. What is your heart longing for? What are you fearful of? What do you desire? And how are you using your personality to try to get those needs met in your life? And sometimes we are in healthy areas doing really well in our personality, and then other times we get stressed or we use our defense mechanisms and we're not our best self. And so the Enneagram as a tool helps us to recognize when we're growing and doing really well in the world, and then also when we're stressed and struggling, and how to adjust and try to get ourselves back on the path of health and growth. So when I was learning, Beth McCord calls the Enneagram like the rumble strips on a highway. So imagine your life and your personality, you're driving down the highway, and the tools and the components of the Enneagram that we'll be talking about can provide like that rumble strip when you start to get ready to get to the gravel part to help you veer back onto your best path. And it's wonderful because it gets to the deep heart issues that are happening in your life quite easily. But it's also something that can be very powerful and healing and helpful in group dynamics and in family relationships. But also, if it's not used appropriately, it can be damaging, because if someone's sharing about things that are a struggle for them, or where they're feeling like they have a weakness and we're not careful with that information, it can be very damaging. So it's a powerful tool that needs to be used with respect and confidentiality when someone's sharing with you in confidence, but also as a way to build people up and not tear them down. Okay, so how the Enneagram is different than other typing systems is mainly because it's talking about your motivations, not just your behaviors. And so only you can really determine what your Enneagram type is, because only you are living inside of your head, inside of your heart, inside of your body. Only you know what's really going on and what is really your motivation for things. Your outward behavior can be an indicator, but we can also act in a way that we want people to think of us, but actually what our inner dialogue and what's actually happening can be something very different. So as we're going through this, know that you are the one that's going to decide what type you are. No one can tell you what type you are. Only you know what you are. Okay, so basically how it works is there are 9 types on the Enneagram. And no type is better than the other type. They're all equal in value. They all just have different strengths and also different weaknesses. And so as we're going through the different types, you'll be able to see which ones you relate to And then once you have determined what your main type is, then we start going through the components of the Enneagram so that you can use it as a tool for growth. So the first component of the Enneagram is called the lines and arrows. And the lines and arrows use the diagram of the Enneagram to point to other numbers on the Enneagram. So here's the shape of the Enneagram. So there's all 9 numbers, and then you can see that there's lines connecting the different numbers together. So when we are in stress, our line is going to point to the unhealthy characteristics of another number on the Enneagram. And when we're in health or in growth, we're going to point to a different number on the Enneagram that's like the healthy part of that number. So depending upon your number, you're going to be going to different numbers if you're stressed and a different number if you're healthy. So for me, I'm a 9 on the Enneagram. And when I'm in stress, I will go to the unhealthy or low side of the number 6. And then when I'm in health, I will go to the high side or the healthy side of the number 3. Now, I know that right now that doesn't mean a lot to you, because if you aren't very familiar with the Enneagram and you don't know what a 3 is or what a 6 is, that's not extremely helpful. But that's why I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of each of the numbers, because in order to really use this tool well, it's important to have a general understanding of what each number looks like, because we use different components and different parts of each number as we're using this tool. Okay, so I just wanted you to see what that shape looked like and know that you'll be moving around depending upon your number, and it will be different for each number. Okay, so then back to using that same shape. Like I had told you, I'm a 9, which is at the top. It's the peaceful mediator. And the next component of the Enneagram is called wings. And a wing is the number on either side of your number. And when I was taught, Beth told us that our main number is like a pile of scrambled eggs, and the wing is like our salt and pepper. And some people use tons of salt and tons of pepper on their eggs. Some people only use salt. Some people only use pepper. Some people don't use any. And that's how you should look at your wing. Your wing is another number, another personality type that's right beside your number on the Enneagram, and you will use attributes possibly of either of those numbers, and that helps to give your personality variation and interest, and you're going to be able to access the attributes of those numbers easier than maybe someone on the other side of the Enneagram when it comes to the main type. So that's what a wing is. Sometimes people get a little confused about that and think that their wing is maybe a number on the other side of the Enneagram, and it's not how it works. It has to be the number that's directly on either side of your number. So like for me, I'm a 9 with an 8 wing. I could be a 9 that has a 1 wing and an 8 wing, but I find in my personality, I mostly tend towards using the 8 wing, except for in my parenting, sometimes I use a 1 wing. So this will all make sense as we keep going along. But the wings, that's another component. Another component of the Enneagram, which was something that I wasn't interested in when I first started to learn about the Enneagram, but is really important and very helpful, is the passion or the weakness, or you can call it a sin tendency. It's really any of those, but basically every number and every person has something that's hard for them. That's kind of their struggle. And each number has a word that goes with their number that you can use for growth, for really considering the things in yourself that maybe aren't your best parts, and seeing how that is playing out in your life and trying to consider it, and then also maybe try not to do it very often. So that's called the passion or the weakness or the sin tendency. So each number has one of those, and that we talk about that as we're going through the coaching. Another component of the Enneagram is called the triads, and the triads involve 3 centers of intelligence in our bodies, and all of us use these, but you will find that depending upon what your number is, that your number will overuse one of those centers of intelligence more than the other. So it's another point to be able to talk about how can you access maybe the other components of those. So the 3 triads are the head or the thinking triad, and the numbers that I'm going to tell you those numbers off hand here while we're talking about it. So the numbers on the Enneagram, and I'll go through this again when we're going through each of the numbers, but the head triad are numbers 7, 6, and 5, and their main struggle would be, emotional struggle would be with anxiety, and they're really longing for security. The heart triad are numbers 2, 3, and 4, and their main struggle would be with shame, and they're really longing for significance in the world. And then the gut triad is numbers 8, 9, and 1, and their emotional struggle can be around anger, and it plays out differently in each number, and they have a really strong desire for justice. So I really like using the triads when we're we're at the beginning of trying to determine what your type might be. If I say, of these 3 emotions, which one do you feel like you feel most often? Are you angry, feeling shame, or are you struggling with anxiety? And then if you say, oh, I'm for sure anger, then automatically we're gonna start asking questions about, are you an 8, are you a 9, are you a 1? And that can help narrow down to determine which one you might be, which number on the Enneagram you might be. Okay, the next component that we use in the Enneagram is called levels of development. And there are 9 levels of development in each personality type. And so we'll go through the number 1 level would be like your number at its very healthiest. And there's all of these sentences and descriptions that describe what it looks like when you're really doing well in your number. And then as we go down in the numbers, it starts to get a little more unhealthy, Oh, a lot of stress, defense mechanisms are coming into play, all the way down to really you're struggling with a psychotic condition at the end. I mean, we all are capable of health, and we're all capable of really going low. And so that's another part of the tool that we just discussed through those. What do those levels of development look like, and how do we get to where we're living mostly in the higher levels of development? Okay, the next part, each number will have a defense mechanism that they use to be defensive. The bottom line is being defensive. And so that's another tool that we use to consider, okay, if I'm being defensive right now, what's going on? And so trying to find new ways of handling our stress or our struggles, but also being really aware that that's going to be our tendency, so we can help each other when we know that a certain number, this kind of situation is going to cause defense mechanisms to rise. How do we have empathy for that and work through the areas of weakness in our personalities and in our relationships? The other component that we use that I learned in my curriculum, I'm a Christian, but even if you aren't a Christian, you can think of these words that I'm saying as just like the essence of who you were created to be. And there's 2 words for each type that I have found to be extremely helpful as a guide to know just 2 little words that describe the essence of who I am and the way I was created, and how I can use those words to bring goodness into the world. We all have strengths, and I like using that when we're going through our teachings as well. We always like to talk about the relationship issues, like what might be some struggles that you have in your personality type with other people, and then what do you bring to your relationships that's extremely helpful. We also will go through how we can bless and be an encouragement to all the different numbers on the Enneagram, and what is going to be a way that people can love you well and care for you well and interact with you well. There are a few other components of the Enneagram that I want to tell you about that are quite a little bit more advanced as far as the components, and not everyone gets to that level, but the Enneagram is a wonderful tool that you really could use your entire life. There's just so much content and teaching around each of the components that you could use it for self-evaluation and for evaluating in growth in your relationships and your teams. Really unending. That's very helpful. But so there's a couple of other areas I'd like to just tell you about, just so you have an understanding that these are parts of the Enneagram. One of them is called orientation to time, and the other one is called your stance. And depending upon your type, you're going to fall into 3 categories of orientation to time. The first one is called in the present, like you're really easily living in the present tense, not the present tense, but the present moment. It's not English, it's the present moment. The past, your mind is often thinking of the past, or your future. You're very vision oriented and you're looking towards the future. Also, coinciding with those, they're called stances, and that's the way that your personality interacts with the world, and they are called the aggressive stance, the withdrawing stance, and the dependent stance. And those actually coincide with orientation to time. So if you're someone who lives in the present, you're a dependent stance, and those are numbers 1, 2, and 6. If you're someone who spends a lot of time thinking about the past, your stance is called the withdrawing stance, and that's numbers 4, 5, and 9. And if you're someone who's a future-oriented thinker, you're in the aggressive stance. And that doesn't mean you're mean. It just means that's the way you're interacting with the world, is in an aggressive way, and that's not a negative thing. That's just how you present yourself. And that's numbers 3, 7, and 8. There's another component called subtypes, and that is when the Enneagram gets super duper interesting. I love learning about subtypes. This is the book that I use most of the time. It's Beatrice Chestnut. She's a PhD, and she has done a lot of studying about the subtypes within all 9 types of the Enneagram. So in essence, there's 27 personality types in the Enneagram, because each type will have 3 subtypes underneath it. So the 3 subtypes are called self-preservation, social, or sexual one-to-one. And if you think of it like a layer on cake, you're going to use all of those just like you use all of the instinctual subtypes, the head, the heart, and the gut. You're going to use all of these in your personality, but there's going to be one that's very dominant. And so it just gives you more in-depth understanding of your personality and what you're valuing in the world. And sevens can look really different depending upon what subtype they are. And so just if you meet someone and you're like, we're the same number, I can't believe we're the same number, it probably is you're a different subtype. So let me give you a description of how you may know what subtype you are. So if you are a self-preservation subtype and you're walking into a party, your values and what's important to you is probably going to have something to do with the aesthetics of the room, the heat, the coolness, the crowdedness or the spaciousness, whether the food looks delicious or if the bathroom is clean, or how long it's going to last and if you're going to be comfortable. It has a lot to do with I guess I would have to say pretty much your physical comfort, like you're pretty bodily aware of situations. So that would be a self-preservationist. A social subtype would walk into a party and think, oh my goodness, they're very aware of social structures. So they'd be seeing like, what's the hierarchy going on in this relationship? Or this group of people? How can I connect in here? Who's got the power in this situation? Community and tribal sort of, the idea of connectedness with others is really important to the social subtype. And then the last one is called the sexual or one-to-one subtype. And that person might come into a party and be like, who is the most interesting person here? And I'm going to talk to them the whole time. So they really, really enjoy a very invigorating conversation. They're going to be maybe the thrill seekers, like would like the idea of maybe jumping out of an airplane or doing something really kind of out there. They like that electric sort of sensation with relationships and with the world. So I'm sure that there are a little bit of each of those that you can relate to, but I think that often you will find that your values will lie in one of those categories. And it adds a whole nother dimension to your personality when you add that layer in as well. And then there's one more component I wanted to tell you about, and it's called tri-types. And this is when you do an assessment of the Enneagram, there's a lot of online assessments. A lot of times you will get back your results and it'll tell you, okay, let's say you're 80% a 7 and you're 69% a 4 or something like that. And it'll give you kind of an order, the percentages of which types you might be. And those can be very helpful, but not the only way to determine what your type is. But that is different than tri-types. So we aren't our 3 top percentage numbers that we get back in an assessment. We have to determine what our main number is. And then the teaching of the tri-type says your main number will land in one triad. It'll either be in the head or the heart or the gut. And then whichever two that your main type is not in, you're going to have a personality type that rises to the surface for you in each of those areas as well. So for me, being a 9, I'm in the gut triad, which means that then I will also have a type that I'm strongest in the thinking triad, and then I also have one in the heart triad. So it's not just what my top 3 numbers are, it's a different kind of test. So anyway, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of information about that. So I'm going to sign off for now, and then I'm going to create the next video about all of the types and go through the heart's desires, what they're longing for, what they're fearful of, what it looks like in health, what it looks like in stress, defense mechanisms. And so then hopefully you'll have an understanding of each of the types and be able to discern which one yours is. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.